Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Maartje.
And we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it. Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week, we're taking a little bit of a different approach. We won't be addressing a movie, a TV show, or a book. We will actually be talking to an actor, and hopefully we'll have more actors on in the future, but we're very, very excited to have our first one.
Very excited. And we're also talking about Andy Haldane a lot today.
Yes, absolutely. Those of you who have seen the HBO miniseries The Pacific, this will be an episode that you'll probably enjoy a lot.
If you've not seen it, you should definitely watch it. Editing Maartje here. There's also a video version of this podcast available on our YouTube channel. You can find us if you go to youtube.com/@RosieTheReviewer. Please enjoy, and if you do, share it with a friend so they can enjoy it too.
We're super fortunate this week to have a special guest with us, our first ever actor guest, Scott Gibson, who played Andy Haldane in The Pacific. And we're actually really, really excited. So welcome, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very flattered to be your first stupid actor on the show.
No, we only recruit the smart actors.
Oh, well, okay, that was a short one then. Bye. And scene. Cut.
Yeah.
No, very happy to be here.
Cool. So we'll jump right into it, if that's cool. Mm-hmm. I think that we really are still talking so much about Andy Haldane today because of Eugene Sledge, who wrote one of the best-selling and probably one of the best war memoirs ever written, With the Old Breed. And obviously, Andy Haldane was his CO, someone that he really liked and looked up to. And so, of course, Andy Haldane features prominently in The Pacific, which was based upon With the Old Breed, among several other books. And so the perspective that we get of Andy in the book is obviously from this very specific point of view of Eugene Sledge, one of his subordinates. So I was just curious, when you were preparing for the role of Andy, what materials did you have access to? How much did you know about him? And how important was it to kind of get outside of this one perspective of Andy and really make him more of a sort of well-rounded person with his own hopes and fears and disappointments that Eugene Sledge might not have been privy to?
Well, I didn't know about Sledge's book, and obviously Sledge. I didn't know about 3-5. I don't believe I knew about Peleliu. I had a general knowledge of the war in the Pacific, and what I think mainly from the naval side of things, not so much Marines or Army. So I got the book. HBO sent me some more background material on the Marines in the Pacific War, the island hopping. And the most important, the best thing for me was that I got a small stack of Andy's letters. So none of these letters were to his family. They were to the dean of his college and his old football coach. His old football coach actually coached at Notre Dame. He coached the Four Horsemen, Notre Dame. If anybody is familiar with them and football folklore in the U.S., college football, big deal. So it's, you can get all that knowledge and know everything that's going on. But in the short time that I had and trying to just get into his mind frame, I really just focused on his letters because they were very personal, eloquent. Even in Guadalcanal, when he's talking about this beautiful full moon shining down on them, and boy, wouldn't it be nice to be there with the girl in your arms on the beach, but the only thing it's doing is helping the Japanese find us, or the airplanes, which I thought was really neat. He spoke a lot about his men, how proud he was, how, separating the men from the boys to some degree. He wasn't picking on anyone specifically, but he talked about guys being complainers, if that was the case, and how that affected other people, but his men weren't like that. He asked about the football team. He mentioned other guys from Bowdoin that were over there or in the Pacific. So I'm looking at it through his eyes, and he's looking at everybody else. So that's how everybody's looking at Andy, but Andy's looking at everybody else. That was his focus, his perspective, his number one concern was always his men. First and foremost, he was not only the leader of 3-5 at Peleliu, K-35, he was a member of K-35. He was a friend, a mentor. He, by all means, he could be strong and firm, but always fair. I mean, you knew if he was speaking to you or, giving orders, or I don't know so much reprimanding. I didn't really see too much of that, but, so much respect for him. And he had that for his men. So that is the approach I took when I was filming, was just looking at these guys. And I was a fair bit older than most of the guys I was with in 3-5, Joe and Rami and Martin and Brendan. They, all younger than me by a fair bit. And Andy was 27 at Peleliu, when a lot of these guys would be 19, 20, 21 kind of thing. So I was able to look at them as these young, not kids, but students or guys he was teaching, like he taught in football and everything like that. And that helped me tremendously. All the other sort of research you could think of, within the moment of doing it, it's good to know, but it's not helpful. Sort of like good knowledge or worrying too much about how he was as a warrior. I could never get up to speed on that. How proficient he'd be with the 30 cal or, all of his weapons, anything like that. You sort of forget about all that and try and protect his men. So that's where I went with it.
How long did you have to prepare?
I didn't have that long. I had probably when I found that I was booked and when I shipped off, it would have been a month, and all the other things I had to do. And then got to Australia and we had a few days, and then we had a brief but very intense boot camp.
Listen, I heard you didn't even dig your own hole, so.
I did not put up my own tent. I fully admit that. No, the XO had a couple of privates put that up for me, which I was okay with, because I'd never done it, and I would have been fumbling with it for hours and looking like an idiot. And Freddie Joe would have just had something else to bug me about.
It's a good thing you played the CO then.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I didn't. In terms of our boot camp, I was the only officer. I kind of had the most to know to, find out in that time. Yeah, I mean, everyone else had a lot to learn as well. But Mike Stokey, who was the XO, told Freddie Joe, he's like, you got to just lay off Haldane, like he's mine kind of thing. And it wasn't 100% that he was going to lay off him or Bruce Whitfield. For sure, they got their shots in, but they did. I think they did back off a bit, just because I was with the XO like the entire time. I would do certain drills with the other guys, but like as a group, sometimes we do drills, and I was just beside him. I wouldn't take part in them, and they developed that kind of separation. So like I was able to see how Stokey operated as an officer, with his NCOs and everybody else training, and that served me better than had I just been lumped in with the other guys, which is what I wanted right from the get-go to be. I didn't want to be separated. I mean,
probably you and Andy both on that front.
Me and who?
You and Andy both on that front, probably.
You get off the bus, it was in Australia, and we were in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally the edge of a rainforest, nothing else around. And that was it. I knew I was the only officer. So they were, okay, Haldane, you're with me. That's the XO Stokey, and everyone else over there. And I immediately was like, oh shit. Okay, let's see how this plays out. And then Freddie and Bruce Whitfield with their, Stetsons like tight at the eyebrow, firm on the brim there kind of thing. And they were just eyeballing me the whole way as Mike Stokey is walking me over to the CP, telling me, you're going to be with me the whole time. And I don't even know what else he was saying, because Freddie Joe was just looking right through me. And I started to just, feel a little weak, I think. And he got about a yard away, and then he said, you going back to your bitch tent, bitch? And he spat tobacco at my feet and kept walking. And I thought, oh, well, isn't this going to be fun? I made a new friend at camp. Yeah, you're a rank lower if you're an officer. So I was Lieutenant Haldane, but the name that stuck for him was Dick Licker. So hey, Lieutenant Dick Licker, get over here, get the fuck over here and learn something. Yeah, there's nothing PC in boot camp now or then, but it was still without that experience and training, that series never would have been the same as good by far. You can only act so much, but having the guys that are the real deal and been there and know everything and train you, and they were Marines, so it was very special to them. Dale did Saving Private Ryan, and he, Band of Brothers, he's a Marine. I mean, it was so special to him, so special to Freddie Joe and Whitfield and Sergeant Bunch and the whole part of the cadre that were Marines. So we had to get it right. And we usually, would look to them for getting things right as opposed to anything from a director. We wanted to make sure we were doing justice to the men that we were portraying.
Did you feel that right away? I mean, when the brothers had been out, obviously, so you weren't the first group to do this. So did that add to the pressure of getting it right, you think?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, band was, because I had auditioned for band. I'm not old. For band, everyone initially had scripts. It was Spears dialogue. So everyone had that. You went into the room or sent tape or whatever. And I was in the States, but had to go back to Canada. And so I sent a tape and didn't hear anything. Obviously, I think it worked out well. But Damian Lewis, made Dick Winters. I think he did an okay job.
Passable,
Yeah, he was all right. He was all right.
Yeah. There's something really poignant to me about Andy Haldane being 27 years old and being like the grown-up in the room and just being, this like almost mythic figure, this like war hero, especially by the time the sledge gets there, like Andy's already been through it a little bit. And just hearing about him writing his letters back to the dean of his college about football and whatever, I'm like, 27 is a young man, Oh, yeah. But an accomplished dude, athlete, as I posted the anniversary of his death. It was October 12th. And I always do a post. And this time around, I had 2 yearbooks from Bowdoin. And one of them was 1940. And I didn't know he played in this band, in this swing band, the Polar Bears. And he played saxophone. And they toured around and they were a hit. And he was captain of the football team. He was voted most popular at Bowdoin. Baseball. I think he did fairly decent in his grades. Certainly in his, like I say, his writing in the letters, all the letters really, it's just like, wow, this guy is pretty bright, articulate and thoughtful. And when I was on set, actually, there were times of like walking around and like background guys at all, I'm going to the loo or to get a Spielberger at the craft tent, and guys are saluting me and Skip and all, and I just at first I was like, damn, I'm Scott, I'm going to the washroom. But everyone or anyone that knew for the most part about Andy Haldane, I got a lot of respect for that, and I felt I had to earn that on set in terms of how I conducted myself and what I did, not just on the camera but kind of off it as well. And kind of, the other delinquent actors that I was with, the immature young men that they were. No, they were all pretty good, but that was pretty neat. That was wild walking around like that. Really cool. It did definitely help. Is there anything that was maybe scripted and not included, or that was filmed and they cut, or anything from Andy's real life that you wish were included?
After all these years and everything, all the events I've done and all I would say the most, I don't know if it's heartfelt, but some of the stuff I've heard from Marines about my performance as Andy, like they see that as the quintessential performance of a Marine in a war movie, in a war series. He as the quintessential leader. It's extremely flattering to hear that, and very, very humbling. I think he could have been all the way through the series because he was at Guadalcanal, Cape Gloucester. However, just the way they were forming the narrative, it was the grunt sides, so it was just all Sledge and Lecky and Basilone, and everything you see is what they see. So there could have been a lot, but there was one scene that I did in F2 with John Seda. You see him raid the army encampment, all the supplies, they scatter when they're getting bombed, and the Marines come in there and steal stuff. And he's got this bag of booze and he runs away. And what you don't see is as he's getting out of that area and towards where the Marines are, I come out of this foxhole CP thing. And at the end of the day, so colors, so they're lowering the flag and the trumpet's going, and we both stand face the flag and salute. And he turns and he drops the bag. Of course, it's filled with bottles of booze. So it's clankety clank, and he's like, "Oh, damn!" And Lieutenant Haldane at the time, David Nutter directed that episode 2. So we're both saluting, and he's looking this way, and I'm looking at him a bit, and then flag goes down, all done, and I turn and look at him, and I just say, "As you were, Sergeant," and walk away. And our head writer came up after Bruce, and he said, I've spent months, years on this thing, and months writing it, months and months. And this is the first time I realized, it just hit me that both you guys die, both your characters die, Haldane and Basilone. And he was in tears. Like he had, not like bawling or anything, but he was upset by it. He's like, to see both you guys here in this moment and realize what happens to you. Really, really special moment. It was great. And it got cut. And I think it just got cut for continuity reasons, or Haldane hadn't been introduced. Like they had a little bit more trouble with this one because you have these 3 different groups and everyone's in green. So when they went back and putting it all together and they had someone come in, it was a friend of Tim Van Patten's editor. And this guy was saying, look, you got to find a way to separate these guys a bit, so people know who they are, kind of thing. I don't know. I think it was good, well enough written and filmed and everything that people could figure it out. But my guess is that, okay, well, Haldane wasn't established yet. So let's cut that scene, which I thought, to see him and Barcelona at that point, I thought, my God, that, they didn't necessarily run into each other. I'm sure Andy would have heard about John Barcelona, right? Certainly after that, if not during. So, and possibly vice versa. I mean, Andy had a similar experience at Guadalcanal in terms of being attacked and where he was and what he had to go through. He didn't pick up a machine gun with bare hands or anything like that, but he was platoon leader at the time, the machine gunners. So he'd have set those up and positioned and been back and forth and everything like that too, right? So.
Yeah, actually, in one of Lecky's other books, he does mention Andy Haldane. I don't know if they met, but he had heard of him. So I feel like they could have made that work. I feel like they could have. Yeah. I mean, Bart and I always joke that all war shows suffer from all these white guys look the same, especially in like helmets and everything. But I feel like, they did have the overlapping scene where like Lecky meets Sledge, which didn't happen in real life, and, all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, I feel like they could have made it work.
I think, at least that and F2 and F3, they were all in Australia, right? I don't know how much, if Andy went AWOL, I doubt he went AWOL. Like everyone else did there, all the enlisted men. But I heard a story of him dating an Australian, she was a singer, actress. They were there for 9 months. I'm sure you could have seen him in the bar when there's that almost fight. Or that was weird where they're eating the ice cream cones. And, that was a little off. Like the guys that, I don't know. They'd have been in the bar
I always
chasing
forget
girls.
that scene happened. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty forgettable, that one. But yeah, the whole love story part of it. I mean, how much that fit in terms of the whole series, I don't know. But yeah, you got to have some love in there somewhere, I guess.
That's a little dark, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, Bruce McKenna was saying, and this was a podcast a couple of years ago maybe, but saying that if the Pacific had been made before Band of Brothers would have had to been a lot more gruesome. And he said, this was HBO and cable, and we got some leeway, but by no means were we allowed to do what we really wanted to do with the Pacific. So you think it's gruesome what you see. It was going to be like, I don't know, say how many times more, but a fair bit more brutal. And then, Band comes along and, it would have looked really soft, I think, and just as a piece of television. Right.
Oh, we always say the mood feels different. You can tell that Band of Brothers was made before 9/11, and this kind of like people were still like a bit nostalgic for World War II and like that kind of stuff. And then you can tell the Pacific was made after 9/11. It's much darker, it's much grittier, it's much more like hopeless and complex, and there's all kinds of things going on.
Yeah, and you read these books and these accounts, and I'll talk a bit later about Peleliu and being there, but when you know what that terrain was like and what they were up against and how things were, I mean, even like what the Marines went through at Guadalcanal with the Japanese, first time they were fighting with them, and they're like, okay, this is not the same enemy, and here we go. They weren't nice to the Japanese, I'll say that, right? Like, people don't, you assume maybe certain things, but they were very, very brutal to each other. And what the Marines experienced first in Guadalcanal, and that's when they said, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, I guess, Andy's main relationships in the show. So obviously the big one is with Eugene Sledge. Also, he seems to be friends with Eddie Jones, Hillbilly. The scripts from the Pacific came out a little while ago or became available. And people have been sending around the scene where Eddie has died. And then really the first and only time we hear his name in the series is when Andy says it over his body after he's passed away. And it's like an absolute gut punch of a scene. So I was wondering if we could, maybe talk a little bit about like those relationships and like how did you kind of approach those in collaboration with the other actors and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't, in real life, how much Sledge would have had interaction with Andy would have been very little on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, the shows can exploit that to some degree. The scenes that we had, I think there was one that was cut, actually, or didn't make it into the final draft, where Sledge goes into the CP after the Marine is killed by the other Marines. The day after, Sledge, someone's coming at him out of a foxhole and he can't see. And we had this scene where Sledge comes into the CP and he's talked to him for a bit. And he says, Sledge, when you see him, shoot him. Kind of doesn't matter who it is if they're coming at you in your foxhole, which I thought was pretty, it's like, wow. Certainly with Eddie, he would have, I don't know if he mentions him in any letters, but Eddie was Haldane as a lieutenant, that fierce of a warrior and leader. They don't do justice. They didn't really have the time, but I mean, he patrol sort of going into the hills on Peleliu, the Umabrogel, with this valley, and of course getting sniped at. And Eddie jumped on the back of this tank to guide to where he saw they were getting fired at. And he got shot a couple times, fell off the back of the tank. The tank kept going. He got back on the tank, directed the fire, and he was shot. I think he was shot about 6 times and died from that. That's how he died. It's different in terms of acting too, how close you are with the other actor. Like I became pretty close with Leon. We got along quite well. And Tim Van Patten directed that episode, and we shot it a few different ways. He was encouraging me to be a little more emotional or maybe just get a take like that, which I hesitated because if you do that and it's really not what you feel you want to do, then the director can just use it, right? Or the editor will pick that scene. So I kind of turned that down a notch. But yeah, it was he's like, you're there, and it just like, Eddie, just say Eddie kind of thing. I was like, yeah, just how that hit him. It would have been extremely hard.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's, I think this like one perception of Andy as Sledge saw him, which was, very like heroic and all this stuff. But Andy's a little crazy sometimes, there's a few scenes where at one point, he's like, gonna go check things out. And if I don't come back, the company's yours. And I mean, even the manner of his death where, he kind of put his head up and then ended up getting shot. Like he could have asked someone else to do that as the CO. There's like so many things that he did where it's like, yeah, he took these really brave, reckless actions and, maybe did things that were a little wild. So I thought his relationship with Eddie, they were these two officers who, kind of understood each other in that specific way. And then, to lose Eddie in the middle of all this terrible fighting, it must have just been like just such a shock.
Yeah, I think in those circumstances, you think a guy like that is invincible, which is certainly what a lot of them thought of Andy. And in terms of the things he did and patrols he led and everything else, like I could totally understand why. And his last moments, I mean, just insane. But to lose an officer like Eddie, I mean, I think by the end of those last few days of Andy's life, he was the only officer left in 3-5 still standing. All dead or wounded. So it shows you what type of officers they had as well, right? Like those guys were all, and they took their lead from Andy. And again, how I saw it is just he was never going to, I think the hardest thing for him would be to send men to do something that he knew they might not come back, or just like, if he could do it, he would lead it.
Yeah.
In the Cape Gloucester, where after that he got his Silver Star. So he was on a patrol. He wasn't company commander then. He might have been with a different company. And anyway, his platoon that he was with got attacked, and they got pushed up into this top of this hill, nightfall, and getting attacked by the Japanese. And it was Japanese Imperial Army, like the elite of the Japanese soldier, attacking them. And it was hand-to-hand combat. And this is a first-hand account. And it's going to be in the book that Garrett Shatrowski's writing, because he interviewed this guy that was there, and he said this guy's like a private. He looks down the line and he sees Andy, and he's got his 45 in one hand and his K-bar in the other, and he puts his K-bar into this Japanese soldier, and he flicked him off the ridge like he was throwing a football.
Wow.
Right, and you just like, I read his letters, and it's like, you think he's in the humanities, he's like assistant dean of the humanities. And then you think of him doing that, and he got the Silver Star for that night.
It's college boy. And then, I guess, but you
Right.
don't know your love till you're in that situation, I suppose.
No, no. Again, he could have been in F4 Cape Gloucester, but I just wanted more of me in the whole thing, really.
Yeah, well, that's what we all wanted, Scott, of course.
Yeah, I'd be getting more checks now, right? More residuals.
In that vein, could you tell us anything more about the Andy bio and potentially you may be reading the audiobook?
I know that he finished the manuscript, Garrett, and spoke to him before going to Guam and Peleliu, and they were shopping it around for a publisher. And as of now, I don't know that they've secured one yet. And, I was sort of hoping that with press that I do, we're also completing the documentary of Guam and Peleliu, that could sort of help with that. I know there were some offers floated out there, but I think it's yet to be picked up.
You can't wait for this.
Yeah, there's so much more in there. And he's like, oh man, it was huge. At the time, before he pared it down, was like 300 pages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
so you go like, how much, there's a lot about him, right?
Yeah. I think people are really looking forward to it. People are really looking forward to hearing you read it. That's the word on the street.
Yeah, no, I can't wait. So with our documentary and the Peleliu side of it, I picked out some of his letters. And so as you go along with me and Peleliu and the group I'm with, you'll just hear him in the lead up to Peleliu at Peleliu. And then his last letter was 3 days before he was killed. It's to a friend back home. It's a bit of a tearjerker.
Yeah, no doubt. Can you tell us a little bit about your trip to Peleliu Airfield and the kind of stuff that you were doing out there?
Absolutely. Yeah, we, Tracy Hunter and Beyond the Call, charity she started, taking veterans to events and battlefields. I'm now co-director of. So Al Chatwin, a veteran that she's known for a few years and has taken to Normandy and Hawaii. He's based in Dallas. He was in the Navy. He was stationed at Guam. He didn't see any combat, but he was in Guam in 44. Landed there in 44. I think he was there about 9 months. He'd never been back. So 80 years later, we took him to Guam and they rolled out the red carpet. We got on the Navy base. He met one of the admirals there. He met the commander of the naval base, governor, lieutenant governor, had the time of his life. Finally felt, because we at the end of the trip, and I'd asked him, because Al, I didn't see combat, and he goes on these things with other veterans. So I don't deserve this. Like, he's the sweetest, loveliest man, very bright, very funny, but just very humble. I asked him, I said, how do you feel now? Like, do you feel worthy? And he was in tears saying, yeah, this has just been the trip of my lifetime. So that was just awesome. And then from there, we went to Peleliu. Myself, Tracy, and 2 Marines that I know, Iraq, Afghanistan vets, that connected with online. And I just threw it out to them one day. It's like, hey, you want to go to Peleliu? And they're like, damn right we do. So they met up with us and we did just a 5-day tour over the 80th anniversary of that battle. So the Marines had a really nice ceremony. There were dignitaries from Palau, from Japan, from the US, Peleliu, obviously. The Commandant of the Marine Corps was going to go, but he couldn't get out of the Pentagon or couldn't get out of Washington because the weather was so bad. So that whole ceremony, but being there, absolutely surreal to roll up to that island. You get to Koror, the main island of Palau, and then we took a speedboat about an hour and 15 or so to Peleliu. And it's all these islands are coral. The Germans, when they had the island pre-World War I, dug a tunnel, a channel, I guess, kind of thing. They dug out all the coral so bigger ships could get through. And they were mining phosphate on Peleliu, which is why it was important. And then they lose the First World War, the Treaty of Versailles, we're giving it all away. And the Japanese took Peleliu. And to lead up to World War II, they had all this time, obviously, to make it just an absolute fortress of coral and tunnels and caves and bunkers. And all the vegetation was blasted off the island, pretty much when they landed and then during. So it was just to look like the crater. You see footage of it, right? There's no foliage or trees or anything, but where these caves are and how they were situated, it's just they could pop out and attack and go back in and get away, or they could roll their gun, the airfield. They were able to roll their artillery, say maybe like 105s kind of thing, and shoot at the airfield. And then pull them back into the mountain as well. So that's getting there and seeing that. You think of the battles in Europe and going there. And I've been to Normandy several times. But that was just, it was like you were in a movie. You couldn't believe that people fought there. It's so small, that hill area. When you get up there in Hill 140 where Andy was killed, like you just like, guys, it seemed like it would have been like a bar fight almost, that they were so close and on top of each other. And then the heat and, the dysentery and not having water the first few days. The airfield has since been reconstructed. It can now sustain the landing of a heavy bomber. I think it's over 1 kilometer long. And it was the Marines that built it. We went and visited the guys that are maintaining it now, and it's no asphalt on it. But I asked the guys, like, you guys going to pave this? Someone might, but we're not going to. We're Marines, man. We don't do asphalt. Like, okay, all right, cool guy. But incredible, because it was all overgrown in towards the runway. So it was maybe looked like a road you drove on, and all cleared away and rebuilt, and to run across that towards go from Orange Beach and then the airfield, and then get to where the admin building is. And if you saw pictures of that I posted, HBO did a tremendous job of rebuilding that, because when I was in there, it felt like I was on set in Australia. It felt like identical. And then the second time we visited to shoot a little bit more, these 2 minibuses show up and all these Marines pile out. And, they're dressed in their camo and they come over. So we kind of just befriended them, told them what we were doing, got them inside there and said, hey, we want to recreate a little scene from the movie just with us sitting here talking, kind of thing. And they were like, damn right, we'll do that. And it turned out they were the band that were playing at the ceremony. So Mike Francis, one of the Marines that was with us, Mike Francis and Neil Favre, 2 beautiful gents. And then afterwards, Mike turns to Neil and he goes, man, it's always the band that gets the glory, right? I mean, we're the infantry's off doing stuff right now, and the band just rolls up and they get in the movie and shit. Like, it's always the band. And then being up on 140, I wasn't exactly where Andy was hit, but to know overgrown, it's a jungle. It was so hot. It's typhoon season, like the humidity there, insane. Just being there when it's all overgrown and everything like that. But I'm just trying to imagine what it was like at that time. And, they were from the 3rd Battalion. 2 other companies had already been relieved from, might have been on the island, but weren't in a kind of fighting position. So 3-5 was the last one. And they went up there and they knew where they were snipers, and he placed, where his machine guns were going to be. I heard he left and came back, or speculate that he came back. He just wanted to double check. Someone that was there with him was like, he just, for whatever reason, just left his head. Like, I mean, he knew, but he just left his head up maybe 2 seconds longer than he should have. Like that short of a margin, like 2 seconds.
Well, and you could fuck up 1,000,000 times in peacetime and it wouldn't cost you your life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just, that he felt no pain. Like it hit me there, but I think that it really hit me when we went to Orange Beach, because we did it in reverse. We got there and we had a guide like, hey, we can take you to 140 right now. Okay. We just came from Guam the night before and we got there. Okay. And we went. So did 140 airfield, admin building, then Orange Beach. And that really hit me. I was just, because it looks so beautiful, right? And this island, the weather overcast, like I say, sort of tail end of typhoon season. But I was just thinking of him, like this could be him, or could have been him years later visiting the island. Like it's me, and I'm seeing, like, I get this opportunity to see this island in peacetime, and I have this opportunity to be here and do all these things because he was here and he did what he did, and they did what they did. And I had a weird thing too, is I had this fever. I think I picked up something in Guam, and I was having some funky nightmares when I was there. I got to tell you, it was really weird, but I was just kind of drained and everything. And we had some other stuff to maybe we were going to film or do. And I said to Tracy, I'm sitting on the beach and kind of in tears. And I'm like, I'm done. I can't talk anymore about it. I can't, I'm just sitting there on the beach, like I'm done. And like I say, to know that he missed out on all these opportunities, but the good feeling that I had was just, hey, I have the opportunity to live my best life, because of his sacrifices. And I get all these trips because of him. And, people relate to me from the show as Andy Haldane. And there's just so much blessings and gifts, and talking to wonderful ladies, like it's just this gift. So I'm always happy to talk about Andy and my experience.
Yeah, obviously Andy means so much to so many people, and to you too as well. You're carrying him with you all these years later. And yeah, I mean, I think it's really meaningful that you're still engaging with these projects that have to do with Andy, that you're still kind of like carrying his legacy.
Yeah, his nephew, Steve Moore, recently on Messenger sent me a picture of Andy's headstone in Arlington National Cemetery, and there's a few rocks on it. And he said, ever since the show and you bringing him back to life, he said, I've seen more and more rocks there on his headstone. And going to Peleliu, someone that was part of the adventure tours that putting everything together for us there knew the show and knew me. So then all these locals from Peleliu, or they've come from the Philippines, or maybe it's Koror, they really don't speak very much English, but they know who Andy Haldane.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, because the one guy who's fluent in English as well, he's like, Scott Gibson from the Pacific is coming. They're like, yeah. So then these guys, I posted a picture. The beautiful people too. Like there's only 500 people that live on that island. Pretty dirt poor. Everything costs a hell of a lot there. There's no gas station. They got to get it brought in jugs, the whole 9 yards. But they are beautiful people and so nice and happy. And so I had my little posse of my Peleliu guys. I call them the Haldane gang. So that's my Haldane gang right there. Beautiful
so
people.
What are the people who live on the island now? Like what are their thoughts about everything that happened in World War II? Obviously, they're a little square of turf being fought over by everyone else.
Well, similar to Guam and indigenous people there, and this is what someone in Guam said, but I think a similar feeling in Peleliu is that as crazy as it sounds, they've learned to live with being occupied. So all that happened to them pre-war, at Guam, it was the Spanish that colonized Guam, and then much later on, Germans and Japanese and Americans, and sort of like we're kind of used to it. And you think of what went on that island, 20,000 guys trying to kill each other. The Japanese commander actually, for the most part, he had them taken off the island before the Marines invaded. I mean, he knew they were all going to die there. And you're able to see, like, apparently where he committed suicide, where his last post was in the hills and in the rocks and caves there. But yeah, they were all sent off the island for the most part. They're aware of it today in terms of the Marines having built this airfield, and probably aware of what's going on with the Chinese and with Taiwan, and being around all these Marines and in Hawaii and Guam and Peleliu, and how aware of it they are, I don't know, but it's not like they're doing all this stuff because everybody's friends and they're not expecting anything to happen. I mean, they're kind of expecting something to happen in the Pacific. And so all these islands, right? Tinian, Saipan, Peleliu, Guam, there's been a big buildup. Like, why would you finish this airfield on Peleliu of all places, right? Where you can land a heavy bomber. And so they're spreading these airfields out in that island chain. And then, I think for the people, they're like, what are we, it just
Here
sort
we
of
go again.
Right.
Yeah,
Pounds, right? Like
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, because like I say, you couldn't find nicer people, happier people, more loving people, sense of humor. But like we went into a cave, and they hunt to sometimes get extra food, obviously, and you're talking crabs and like bats. And we went into this cave because there was some remnants of Japanese radio in there. So it wasn't it's like in one door, wrapped around in the other. And so you go in there, and my friend Neil's got his flashlight. And he's like, oh, damn. And they were, I think, scorpion spiders on the wall, two of them, pretty big. So they got the nasty claws like a scorpion, but the body of a spider. And they're a decent size. And Tracy was in there.
Thank you.
Tracy's in there with us, and you just got your phone light or a flashlight. And I had my phone light, and I'm like, I don't know. I felt like I was in an Indiana Jones movie, and I go, I wonder what's up on the ceiling. And I tilted up on the ceiling of the cave, and it just like all the little sentinels, all the like the babies or something, that just started to move, and like hundreds and hundreds of them started crawling. We were like, so we like just kind of bolted out of there. And then our guide, who's local, is like, what happened? It's like, I don't know, this big, like, he thought it was a coconut crab that we saw. So he's like, it's a coconut crab? And he starts running into the cave. I'm like, no, spider. He's like, oh yeah, but they hunt a lot of that stuff there. There's a cave there that Japanese built, holds 1,000 men.
Oh my God.
Got all these chambers. So you sort of go down into it, and there's chambers. Right. It was like their main kind of headquarters. We met a guy, an ordnance guy. He was in the British Army, Royal Army, and that was his specialty. And he ended up spending 10 years on Peleliu clearing ordnance. And in that 10 years, he said they cleared 66,000 pieces of artillery.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And it's still chock full. Like when you go in the trails and are walking around, you'll see canteens and Japanese gas mask and mortars. They're all safe and everything like that. And, there's a machine gun somewhere, but it's kind of placed on the trail, but what the hell? I don't want to go digging for it anyways,
Yeah,
right?
probably stay on the trail,
Stay in that hill area, and we went over to Najibis where the bunker is. So they were being shelled on Peleliu from Najibis, which isn't that far. Like you can actually, when the tide's out, you could pretty much walk on the coral and just be in about 2-3 feet of water. But there's a big gun there that was shelling them. So 3-5 went over to clear Najibis. So we went over there, and Sledge's bunker, as it's called, is like intact. It's as if you're coming to, there's stuff, obviously vines and everything growing over it. And it's unfortunately full of water. You can't, get in there, but you can see where it was hit with tank or bazooka, like a big, hole. And then you see the rebar and stuff. So just what happened in the show, obviously, and in the book. And then you see it there and you're like, holy crap. And there's Amtracs. There's a American Sherman tank that hit a mine, and it's on its side, not on the Jivas, but on Peleliu. So you can, I don't know how long it would take you to see everything, but for us, we just, having a limited amount of time, we wanted to just kind of get the main things. But I imagine that, there's still a lot of unexploded ordnance on there.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something else about your documentary then? What is it you're documenting exactly?
So it's I can't say return, but going to Peleliu and honoring Andy and 3-5 and the Marine Division, going to the ceremony, me being there for the first time after I wanted to go. Actually, when we finished filming, or I finished filming in March of 2008, I had looked into going to Peleliu, and, pretty decent flight from Australia as well. But I looked into it, and then I was just too, I guess, I don't know, it sounds like a wuss, but like too tired, maybe. Or just too involved in all of that, maybe to go to the island right afterwards. I was a little spent, sort of like my mind exhausted from it in a way that I can't really explain. But I just thought, man, I don't know that I can go and appreciate this, and I'll get there someday. And then boom, 17 years later, it's just the trip to Guam. And then there's a guy I'd met, and I knew obviously about the 80th, and I'd met him in Hawaii last year, and he a guide for Peleliu and Guadalcanal, Tarawa. And he said, I'm going to Peleliu as a guide for the first time, maybe you can go. And I'm like, maybe I can. So I put together that idea with Tracy because she'd been planning to take Al to Guam. So I got a lot of air miles out of it, but it's beautiful and very surreal. And the four of us just kind of fell in love with Peleliu. It's weird to say that, but I'd go back there in a heartbeat. There's a guy, we talked about this, and he went there. I think he was a medic. Anyway, Steve Ballinger, the ordnance guru, had asked this guy if he'd join them on Peleliu. So he was there for 10 years. And you first meet this guy. He might have been a Marine as well, but he sort of didn't talk that much or just look you over and listen and stuff like that. And by the last day, we're leaving and talking to him, and I'm talking to him, and he just, it might have been after the ceremony, the barbecue we had, and I felt like he was like Yoda telling me the secret of life or something like that, because he's just like, Peleliu, it's really special place, and it affects people, and like if you get it kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, it got me that way. And he's like, yeah, going like are we smoking a big joint right now?
No, it's just like, okay, so get high and go to Peleliu is what I'm hearing.
Am I high right now? Or is this like, and I said this to Mike Francis. I said, man, I had this, because we did a podcast with him. I said, I had that experience with David. And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, I had the same thing too. I'm going, damn, of all the places you would think like Peleliu wouldn't be the one you want to have your wedding reception at kind of thing.
Yeah, people don't think Peleliu are like most magical place on earth, usually.
No, but it's like I say, with the people there, I know, I'm sure a lot of people traveling, you can say that about anywhere, and that just happened to be that place. And I know obviously I've thought about it a lot, the story and everything else, but then you get there and you just don't expect it. And those beaches, like they're not the big, wide or long Normandy beaches, right? They're, I don't know, 20 yards from water to the berm where the trees start. And on White Beach, where Lecky landed, that was harder for them for a 2-1 because there was a bunker that it was aimed right along the length of White Beach, enfilading fire right down that beach. And I mean, this thing is intact, and they bombed the crap out of it in that whole area and untouched. And all these areas were untouched by all the bombing that happened. And it just embedded in the coral, rocks all around it. And you just thought, man, you could slap a machine gun there right now and just wipe people, just insane. So yeah, like I say, a lot different than the other places for sure. But don't go there in typhoon season. Go in January, February. Go when David's there and have an experience with Yoda.
I think I'd be stuck, to be honest. I don't think I'd get very far.
Oh, we get you some tank treads for your chair. You'd be fine. Don't worry about it.
I'll get the Haldane gang, and then we'll just carry you around like Cleopatra. We'll get the big bamboo.
There you go.
And they'd probably do it. I mean, these guys are, they're incredible, very, very, very helpful. But yeah, I definitely plan on getting back there.
We always get excited when there's like Canada mention on this show. And by we, I mean, I get excited when there's a Canada mention.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if people know, but Scott is also Canadian. We both live in the non-Toronto parts of Canada. So very exciting. Do you have any military history in your family? Like, do you know anything about your family you might have served or?
Oh yeah. Well, for World War II, my dad's father was Air Force. He wanted to be a flyer, but couldn't, I think, because of his eyesight. So he's a rear echelon man stationed over in England for a while. I don't know what bases. My mom's father, he was a sailor and got into the RCMP Marine Division before the war, chasing rum runners, I think in the 30s. Al Capone's guys. And of course, the RCMP Marine Division was taken over by the Canadian Navy, which was taken over by the British Navy. So he ended up captaining about 9 different ships during the Second World War. I think he had one stint, did the Murmansk run. He was on the frigate, first Canadian frigate to sink a German U-boat in the North Atlantic in 1943. And he was on a minesweeper in a convoy in the St. Lawrence. And he sunk another sub in there. So he's on the wall here somewhere, one of these stories. But I never met him. He passed away in a car accident before I was born, 1 or 2 years. But he got the DSC.
Oh, no way.
That's the 3rd highest Commonwealth medal that you can get, Distinguished Service. We don't give them away like, the Americans were. Here you go. Medal for you, medal for no. I'm not taking anything away from anything anyone did. But really, the British and Canadians did, like, it was very few, right? Our Victoria Cross recipients, equivalent of Medal of Honor, very few of those. Second World War, and similarly with the British too. Just get on with it. You don't need a medal.
Yeah.
Chin up.
My grandpa served part of the war at the gun battery at Gaspé, also shooting U-boats in the St. Lawrence. So maybe that way. Yeah.
Get that one.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to take my mom to Halifax over Christmas. She trained as a nurse. And part of that, she was in the Navy. So it's a CFB Statacona. And at the time, it was HMCS Statacona. The Canadians named their bases, after ships, which were named after lakes, right? Lakes and rivers.
Yeah.
All ours. Like my granddad's, the frigate was Waskesiu, which is a lake in Saskatchewan. Yeah. Very, very creative.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of sand from White Beach and Orange Beach, and I call it Najibus. I don't know. It's like so many different names. The spelling is so weird, right? NGED as in David, BUS.
Your guess is as good as mine.
that island over there. So we got some bottles, and this friend had a coin commissioned.
Oh, cool.
That's beautiful.
Love that. That's really beautiful.
So we're going to put that up on the Beyond the Call website and raise some more money to, get veterans. We got the trip in for Hawaii. We're bringing 5 veterans there. 3 from Texas and 2 are in Hawaii. One guy was in the 8th Air Force. I know this is all about me, but the Masters of the Air Tour. But he 8th Air Force, and he was a flight engineer. He's 101. I was just talking to him the other night, and he did some work for the OSS flying ammunitions to the underground in Norway.
Interesting.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any Canadian World War II stories that you'd like to see on screen, or any Canadian historical figures that you wish you could play?
I portrayed Andy Mynarski, and speaking of Victoria Cross, he's one of the recipients of the Victoria Cross. He was a mid-gunner in a Lancaster bomber, shot down on their 13th mission. Everyone bailed. Tail gunner couldn't get out. Andy Mynarski, he was a mid-gunner, and he crawled to the back of the Lank as it was gliding to the ground. And I think they were over France, and it was all on fire. And so he was on fire trying to rescue this guy, tail gunner. And it just couldn't, the hydraulics, the lines were shot, so the turret wouldn't pivot. The tail gunner just waved them off, and Andy gets to the door, salutes them, bails out. The resistance found him. He'd been able to, release his parachute, but he was just too burned up and he didn't survive. The plane landed, tail gunner's still in it, and one of the wings clipped some trees. It spun the plane like that, which jerked turret so that it faced out right to the land as opposed to the side where it was locked. And he was able to bail out. Plane went 100 more yards, crashed and blew up. And the resistance found him, and he made it back to London 4 or 5 months later. I think he was at a pub in London, and in walked his flight crew.
Oh my
other
God.
7, 8 guys hadn't seen him, but he didn't know what happened to Mynarski. I think there's 2 Lancasters in Canada, but one still flies. It's called Mynarski's Lank, named after him. And his bust is one of the valiants at our cenotaph. So they have General Currie, Tecumseh, a couple other guys from World War II, World War I, and there's Andrew Mynarski's bust. So I did this little short film years ago. I think that'd be a good one to do. It's so expensive to do these things, right? Like, I think that was the thing with Masters of the Air, is that HBO was like, we want to do it, but
yeah, we actually talked about this on one of our episodes about why Canada doesn't have a huge number of war movies. And I'm like, honestly, I just think it's too expensive.
Way too expensive. There's really no film industry. And with streaming and everything that, the US is doing, it's really kind of crippled what we have here. So we're like a banana republic, and there's no incentive for anyone here to do anything like that. You could certainly do the stories, but I guess people want to see things explode and missions and stuff like I get that, but I'd have to play a general now. I think one of the boardroom guys smoking a cigar.
I just saw Greyhound last year with Tom Hanks in it. That man is in his 60s playing a boat captain, so I feel like you're fine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's after Andy. It's like anything here that's military. I'm just like, no, I'm kind of no. Like it sort of has to be similar or top that. I think I mean, I could use the work certainly, but it's hard to. It's like how do you top that, right?
Has it changed the way you look at other roles now that you've played a character like Andy on a show like that?
I mean, it's changed my life really in so many ways. I don't, sort of made a living here in the past few years, being in Ottawa, TV movies, Hallmark movies, Christmas movies. Like, they're fun and they're nice, but they're just, it's really hard to say that dialogue, I mean, it's really hard.
Like, it's probably not like fulfilling the fire in your
it's so bad. And then, like, I'm in my own everyday life a bit. I like to be a little weird, funny, just, and don't take myself too seriously. But people want to see you in a suit as a douchebag business guy, or, you're in the military stuff. In those movies, I'm kind of aged out for the ingenue kind of thing. But yeah, it's just so meaningless, really, and transitioning into this role in terms of the charities and doing documentaries and stuff, I find that so fulfilling, spreading the word and keeping the legacy alive and honoring these men. And not only that, but to just, like I say, with these things going on in the South Pacific and these islands, is that if people think this can't happen again, you gotta wake up, because everything else that's happening in the world, like, people that know, right? And how much we can do about it, I don't know. But I think if we all kind of focus on not just helping ourselves, but other people, and kind of sharing that love, and that's going to have some sort of effect. So I sort of feel that with this type of work, that it's not work. I'm going to Texas in a couple of weeks for Veterans Day and going to the football game, and we're taking 5 of these veterans, and to be around these guys, they're 100. the guy I was with in Normandy there, Dennis Bolt, and to be just with him and all the things that people were saying to him, these intimate thank yous and blessings, and just like, wow. And seeing them, and they're just thrilled to be alive, and they're so humble and great senses of humor. And I've learned so much from just being around them. So most certainly, if there was a project that came along that I was passionate about, it's just I'm not chasing anything like that these days. And you take a hit in the bank balance for sure, but I guess I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And if it totally crashes, I'm going off to Peleliu, and I got my Haldane gang.
Just live on the beach.
Get some coconut crab, and just
welcome visit.
Definitely always welcome. Although, and then there's that airfield there, and you kind of wonder, is this where I want to be?
Right? Like when World War III breaks out, is this specifically? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, are they going to be? I mean, that's obviously if you have more of them spread out, it's a lot harder to bomb them all. That's really the theory behind it, right?
Well, hopefully it doesn't come to that.
No. Yeah, really. I don't want to end on a.
Yeah.
Spread the love.
Yes. So we always ask people either what are you reading, or do you have any like World War II books or movies that you think everyone should check out?
I do, yeah. So in my collection, in terms of books, I haven't been there yet in France. I'd love to go, but Vimy.
Ooh.
By Pierre Berton. This is how Canada got on the map in the First World War. No one else could take it. Took them months, right? British, French couldn't take Vimy. Canada took it in 3 days. It was the first time that 3 Canadian divisions fought as one army. And what Burton talks about, and others historians, was that the Canadians just wanted, like, they couldn't go back to people in England, on leave. They couldn't go anywhere. It was just basically the Canadians got their shot, and they wanted to end it as fast as they could. Kind of the original stormtroopers in terms of attacking machine gun nests at night, 1 or 2 guys taking on a nest or a German platoon. And they overran the Germans at Vimy, so much so that the Canadians couldn't get their artillery up fast enough to kind of finish them off, make them surrender. And it would have actually probably ended World War I a lot earlier. So that's a great book, and one that I've had for a long time, called 6 War Years. And that's Barry Proudfoot. And it's all stories from back home, overseas, wives at home with the husband away, and, she has an affair with someone at the country club, and the husband comes home and finds out about it. And she says, well, what happened to you over in England? Anything happened over there? And that was the end of the conversation. One of the anecdotes in there, but just that the prevailing thought in that, it just from all the people and all the interviews, was that it was the most exciting time of their life. And it would sound weird to say that about wartime, but for most of these people interviewed, it really was. And the great, great stories in there. And the final one is Saul David's book, Devil Dogs.
Oh.
Yeah, great book. So first in, last out, King Company from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. And he's a terrific writer. There's a lot to it in terms of info, but how he strings the narrative, and really enjoys his writing. It's very easy. So those 3.
Excellent.
Awesome. That's amazing.
And watch The Pacific as many times as you can, really.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we do.
We will. I'm like, the week between Christmas and New Year's, let's fire up my favorite comfort show, The Pacific.
But it's even like when I watch it from time to time, every time I get more out of it. And a lot of people say, it wasn't as easy initially as Band. The narrative and flow of Band was just easier to follow, I think. The Pacific took a little bit more patience, if you will, and maybe a second viewing. But so many people have told me, it's like, yeah, when I, the second time or third time, and they just, and a lot of said, they prefer it to Band. I mean, that's, subjective, but
yeah, I feel the same way. I prefer it to Band. I do think it takes maybe a couple of watches. And I think if you're just like a casual watcher of war media and you're only going to watch something once, then you're probably going to like Band of Brothers better. But there's just every time there's so many little things in the Pacific. Like there's that one part where Andy's talking about how his dad made the blankets. And then after Andy dies, they put the blanket over his face. Fuck me up, ruined my whole life. But I only noticed after like the second or third watch, right? Like the first watch, you're going to miss things like that.
Well, and Bruce McKenna got that storyline from Steve Moore.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, because you'd asked him about that, and Steve, so that's Andy's sister's son. She had two sons. And yeah, his father worked at the textile mill, and I think he'd been asked by someone if there was anything that went, and he said, well, no, not the uniforms or anything like that, but we did make the blank, which was, like, oh man, here I am going to cry again.
Yeah. Every
So
time.
yeah, so many things like that. But like I say, you go into Heartbreak Ridge. Doss, he was a Marine, right? The conscientious objector.
Yeah. We just did an episode on him. Yeah.
So he landed at Guam, which was no patty cake either. So being there in these islands and flying around, and you're just like the expanse of the area, island hopping, the conditions, Europe, Normandy, no cakewalk for sure. But you go there and, you go to the town and you get your baguette and have a coffee and go tour and everything. And well, you ain't getting that in Peleliu. There's no baguette stand, and it's hard to even get good coffee there. But you see that kind of environment where these guys fought, Guadalcanal and Gloucester and Tarawa and Saipan, and you're just like, oh my God, this is very, very different. So it's, like I say, a pleasure and an honor to talk about all this stuff, and pleasure being on with the two Rosies.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott. I feel like we've talked about so many things that our usual listeners are going to find super interesting. And we really appreciate you giving us all that information about the Peleliu doc as well. Really excited to see that.
Yeah, well, hopefully it'll be out just because we've got some other projects to work on, including we're going to go to Iwo Jima for the 80th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's coming up, in February,
March 29th, the Marines are doing a ceremony there. And through connections, the same guy who's directing Alex's Curry to Normandy.
Yeah.
Chase Millsap, he's a Marine, Green Beret. So he's got connections with the Marines to basically, I don't know if it's 1st Marine Expeditionary Force or 3rd, but if we get to Okinawa, they'll be able to take us to Iwo Jima, and we're going to go up Mount Suribachi. We're going to bring Don Graves, who is, I think, he's definitely the last surviving flamethrower from Iwo Jima. He landed right beside the Bassilone's regiment. He's 100 years old, real firecracker. Maybe we'll carry him up to Suribachi. But I think there's only 6 Evo guys still alive. And
wow.
A different actor from the Pacific is going to interview, like Badge is going to interview one of them, and I'm going to Josh Baton, maybe John Bernfall. And then a few of us are going to go with this camera team, and probably we're trying to hit Pendleton first and then fly from LA to Okinawa and then get connected with the Marines who will get us on a ship over to Okinawa.
I guess we'll see you in a couple of months then and talk some more.
That's right. How was Okinawa? But what a blessing to be able to do all of this, right? And these guys obviously, not getting any younger, and the opportunity to do stuff like, Guam and Peleliu and at Normandy the last couple of years to go to Iwo, we got to do it now kind of thing. And so that'll be another great one to talk about.
Yeah, amazing.
Book me now. Book me now.
So that was a nice and long conversation. I really enjoyed that. How about you?
That was great. Honestly, I feel like every time we speak with Scott, he's just so willing to share information and chat at length about all kinds of things, all these different projects that he does. So we definitely really appreciate him being on, and hopefully everyone enjoyed our little chat.
I certainly did, and I can't wait to have him back on in the future. I think it's just really fun to see someone so passionate about stuff like this.
Yeah, and who else am I going to talk shit about the Canadian winter with?
I mean, not me. I couldn't relate. So, anyway, thank you all of you for listening. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast. You can visit our website, rosieTheReviewer.com, and you can rate us 5 stars if you'd like, and we'd really like it. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.